colleague who began here teaching in 2000. He took a class first through 8th grade and graduated then in 8th grade. And then he took another class first through 8th grade, graduated them, and then picked up a class for a teacher who needed to leave and taught them for 2 years, graduated them in 8th grade. And then he took on the position of pedagogical chair at our school. So he was the person who helped basically looked at all of our schools' pedagogy and worked with networking teachers. And then he went from pedagogy to policy because he stepped into the administrator's position during the high times of COVID and did administrative work for them. So he did, then after that, subject teaching, and now he's our school's mentor and support. So I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Rev Bowen.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I didn't expect more than honestly about 5 people. So it's really nice to see almost all the chairs filled, or almost all these chairs are filled. We've got room over here. I just want to say that I don't work at Live Oak anymore, but Live Oak is dear to my heart. And I've talked to a couple of people already tonight. There are some prospective families in the audience. There are people who just joined the school. And when I was looking at a school to work for as a teacher, I had very young children. So the most important thing to me at that time was finding a school where my children would attend. It was far more important than finding a place where I would teach and make money. And both of my kids came all the way through, and I wouldn't change it for anything. It's a great school. It's a great school. So I hope that helps, but I hope also what I'm going to say helps fill in some blanks if you have any. And there will be times for questions at the end, so if things come up, if it's an immediate, just clarification type of question, raise your hand and I'll clarify quickly, because I get going in my head sometimes and my mouth is trying to catch up and I say things that maybe I don't mean to say. So if I do that and I say something that doesn't make sense, ask me, I'll clarify. If it's a broader question that requires more in-depth explanation, either jot it down or do something to memorize it, because there will be time at the end. Before I start, I want to see just who we have. So raise your hand if you have a child in the early childhood village, kindergarten or below. Kindergarten or below. Okay, and then children in grades. Okay. Anyone above 3rd grade? 4th grade? 5th grade? 6th grade? 6th grade. Good. That's a full spectrum. I expect to see nods at certain points when I say certain things. And so I may say things about adolescence that not many people will nod at just yet. But eventually, you will. Come on in, we're just getting started. Okay. Waldorf education. Started by Rudolf Steiner in 1919. And he was asked by this man who worked in a cigarette factory, Emil Moltz, and he said, Mr. Steiner, Dr. Steiner, can you start an education program for the children of our employees? And Dr. Steiner said, why, yes, of course, I was just waiting for someone to ask, supposedly. And then he brought forth all these amazing ideas for a new educational system, taught very quickly in a 2-week training program, taught 12 new teachers, and they launched. And I find that to be pretty astounding. But the thing I've always loved about Waldorf education, about anthroposophy, the philosophical system that Waldorf education comes from, and Rudolf Steiner himself, is that he said, don't ever just trust what I say. Do your own research. Make your own observations. Come to your own conclusions. So even though I might say occasionally in here, Rudolf Steiner said, we kind of joke about that in the Waldorf movement. The Rudolf Steiner said, because Rudolf Steiner said a lot. He gave over 6,000 lectures, so he said a lot. And it's easy to say Rudolf Steiner said a lot of things. But I'm going to try and base everything I might share with you in practical experience, things I've seen, things I've experienced, things I've done in the classroom. Okay, here we go. The basis of Waldorf education is child development, human development, if you will, but we're going to focus on child development. It is not a well-designed curriculum that we apply to children. It is understanding human development and then designing a curriculum that's quite flexible to meet the children before us. So let's start with understanding some very clear basics about human development according to anthroposophy. And if some of these things sound a little strange at first, just hold on to them. Put them in your cap and sleep on them. You know, just take them and consider them. I promise you, I still think some things sound really strange. Okay, so we have these stages of development that correspond to aspects of the human being. And so let's look at, put colors up here. Let's look at birth to 7. And when I say 7 years old, what I'm really talking about, what Dr. Steiner talked about, is the change of teeth. So it's not by a calendar. There's nothing about dates here. But roughly 7 years old, sometime around there, the children change their teeth. We see the dentition process take place. And in these years, there is a lot happening, as you know, if you have children, that can be broadly wrapped up into saying this is a time of physical development. So the physical body is developing. Certainly there's a physical body developing in the womb, of course. Certainly there are other forces at play during these years in the physical body. Of course. These are just the primary forces, physical development, the physical body that is being worked through and developed for the human being. It will continue to develop, absolutely, but just think of this as the primary. Then we come to (7 to 14 roughly, which is really saying the change of teeth to puberty, another physical sort of sign, sort of blossoming, if you will, that signifies that change of teeth was the start of a new phase, and puberty was sort of the wrapping up of a new phase. And this is what we call the etheric body development, but I think it's easier to think of it as the life body. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. Anything sounding strange yet? Etheric body? That doesn't sound strange? No. Sounds strange to me, thank you. Okay. 14 to 21. This is the time of astral development, which you could most, and if you just like go down the rabbit hole of finding out what did Steiner say about the soul. There are so many different models and pictures and diagrams and he seems to contradict himself a lot, but regardless, we'll just say that this is most easily understood on the surface as soul. So soul development. And then from 21, I'm just going to say 21 plus right now, because we're not going to worry about the rest. We're just going to keep it right here. We have ego. So, just to see that picture, physical body, life body, and when I say body, think loosely. I'm not telling you that I see something etheric. I'm not reading your aura right now. Okay? Astral or soul body, think of body again, loosely, loose term. We're You can say forces if you want to. And then the ego. And there are no hard lines here. Even at the stage that you've lost your first tooth, that's not like some perfect cut off. That's just when you know a change is beginning to happen. Oh, there we go. That's a nice reminder. If you want to put your phones on a vibrate mode or turn your ringer down, let's all try that. And I say it honestly, I'm not getting on anybody. I sometimes can't figure out how to turn my ringer down. But give it a shot. Okay, now, mixed in with this understanding of these years of development, and I'll talk more specifically about them, there are also three sort of soul forces, and again, iron and soul, or the translators maybe it's the translators I need to be upset with. But these are sometimes called soul forces. You have the willing forces, the feeling forces, and the thinking forces. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to go through the most superficial way to look at this. There are many ways that he flips this around, but we're going to stick with the simple version. In this first year of life, when you look at that little child that's born, not even a toddler yet, it's trying to lift its head up, that big heavy cranium we're born with, and it's struggling to move its limbs and to put things in its mouth, to feel them, not to taste them. It's trying to feel them. It's starting to crawl, roll over, sit up, eventually stand and walk. These are mighty will force gestures. You never have to tell the child to do it. Notice? Like, come on. We might do that, but it's silly. We don't need to. We don't need to coach the kid. Come on, buddy. Just roll over. Just roll over. You can do this. Like, there's no need. They're going to do it because their will forces are super strong early in life. Now, right now, we sometimes have to tell ourselves to roll over. And you wake up one morning knowing you're tired. Come on, you can do it. But not so much for the little child. The little child has those will forces innately strong. And this is something we just can see. We don't even have to do anything about it. The only thing we want to do, and so when you look at a Waldorf early childhood class, is to provide it safe space to do what it needs to do. It needs to be active. And of course, we guide it as it ages, as the little one ages closer and closer to this end of the physical phase. We guide it into healthier and healthier interactions. But more than guiding the child, we provide a good model. So if I speak well, guess what that child learns how to do? It learns how to speak. If I'm doing meaningful duties at home, like folding clothes, guess what that child learns how to do and probably wants to try and do with me? To fold clothes. If I'm wiping the table, there's all those basic, simple things that we can sometimes overlook as being incredibly meaningful and actually educational, developmentally, for the child. Those are what, and I don't mean to oversimplify early childhood at all, and I'm so glad my early childhood colleagues are here. There are several, 4, you might get 5. Did you work in kindergarten? You had a preschool, homeschool in your own home, didn't you?
Yes,
yeah. So we've got lots of early childhood experiences in this room. So when we get to the end and you want to ask more questions, it's not my area of experience. So I'm going to give just broad brushstrokes there. But providing them these healthy rhythms, these safe, warm environments where they can exercise their will forces and develop their physical forces and their physical bodies. That's what we need to do. We do not need to teach them their multiplication tables as early as possible. That is a fallacy, a myth, a complete disservice to the child. I'm going to say it again, it's a disservice to the child. You are taking forces too early. You've just taken the little plant that's in your little nursery and you put it out in the winter cold too soon. That's actually what you've done. And that plant's less likely to thrive. It might survive. It's less likely to thrive. The myth of push. Okay. So, then our little dear one grows to that change of teeth, magical time, and if we're observant, we see that it's not just their teeth that are changing, their bodies are changing, their limbs are lengthening. When I started, I don't know if you all still do this, when I started they used to ask the children to reach over their heads and see if they could touch their opposite ears. Because that's just another sign that, yep, the body is really showing these signs that that stage of development is coming to its end and they're entering the next one. It's not a conclusive sign. It's not like if a child can't touch their ear, we say, you're back in kindergarten. No. But it was one way of looking at the child. There are lots of them, and again, I'm not familiar, so if you're curious about that, there are colleagues in this room you can ask at the end. When they go into the grades, we are seeing that the thing I mentioned earlier, there's not just the will to do, but there's the will to imitate. They have a natural will to see the adults around them, especially their parents, and or the teacher who plays that significant role in their life. They have a natural will. You don't have to say, hey, come on, I want you to imitate me. They just have a natural will to imitate. If they're meeting other developmental stages healthily. And there are many reasons. There could be birth trauma. There could be all sorts of things that can interfere with that natural progression of developmental stages being achieved healthily. So there are things that can get in the way. But as long as things are progressing relatively healthily, then we will see this natural will force engage the child's physical body and engage this yearning to imitate. It wants to imitate. It's how they learn to speak in the first place. We didn't have to say, it's ma. I did it with my child a lot because I was fascinated by the whole process. I did a lot of ma, but it was not because I thought I was teaching the child. I was just fascinated. Am I the only one? You guys are looking at me like I'm weird. Surely you guys have babbled, right? I kept saying Wowie too long because my son, that was water, Wowie. And so I just kept using the word Wowie, and finally I realized I've got to use water. You guys have got to learn the word water. Okay, so now we come to the grades, where we make this great transition, and they are coming into a situation where we are going to provide more conscious form. In meeting these forces, these etheric forces, let me say a little bit more about that. So the etheric forces, another way, so life forces, definitely, people will say they are the forces in charge of maintaining health. But the better picture for that is to say that what is health in the human being? That's a picture of balance and rhythm. Balance and rhythm. So when we have healthy balances between the functions of our organs, for example, then we have health. When our organs work in their natural rhythms in the way that they should, then we have health. So that's more of how these etheric forces take hold of and maintain and support the healthy growth of and development of and health of that physical body. And then there are also the ways in which these etheric forces are associated with our learning, let's just say that, which is about memory. Memory. So we can see, as I said, like rhythms in the organs. We have certain rhythms. Our hearts beat at certain rates. Our lungs breathe at certain rates. Our kidneys function at certain rates. Our liver functions at a certain rate when we're healthy. Our digestion functions at a certain rate. Memory is actually a picture of that as well. And this was a great insight that Rudolf Steiner had, that when we're learning things, we have this experience, an initial experience of something, and maybe there's a recognition in the moment, or maybe it's just very unconscious, like it is with a very young child. You watch that young child just knocking stuff off of, counters and tables and whatever. They're just knocking stuff down, and you think, what a destructive little thing. No, of course not, right? This is a little scientist at work, but very willfully, not thinking, not the thinking forces. This is a willful scientist, just experiencing, just pure experience. Oh, look at gravity. Oh, listen to those sounds. That's acoustics. But of course, they're not thinking gravity. They're not thinking acoustics. They're just doing and experiencing, and slowly they are learning about the world. I mean, how do we learn to walk? Right? We got to struggle. Those will forces, we struggle, we stand up, and we're not thinking, no, wait a minute, if I just put 40% more of my weight over here, I won't fall that way. No way, right? We just willfully learn, but we learn. And we learn actually very, very efficiently in those years. In the grades, in the elementary grades, as these etheric forces are taking over, we still have experiences, and we're just ever so dimly dawning on little ahas, just ever so dimly, far more dimly than I ever thought before. I thought these little beings that could talk. I'm sorry, Katie. So Katie was in my first grade class, and I thought she was so smart in 6th grade. It turns out you're just super dimly aware of anything. Joking. Well, actually, so I will say though, with this class, when we got to 8th grade, and I started asking lots of questions about, okay guys, we're going to have a graduation, and one of the traditions of Live Oak is that we go kind of review like what happened. A couple of people stand on the stage and they'll say, what was it like in 1st grade, share a few memories. What was it like in 2nd grade, share a few memories. And so we're in the classroom preparing for my first graduation with the class. I'm like, all right, I don't expect you guys to remember much from 1st grade, fine. But how about, when we get to 4th grade, we're starting to have some memories. It was like that. 5th grade? Last year? Hello. People. They didn't remember anything. Yes. Katie wasn't there in 8th grade. But still, I was surprised to learn, it was a huge learning moment for me, how dimly the learning still is, despite the fact that those same beings can engage quite vigorously in an activity like debate. And you can take some real contentious subjects and they'll go research it and come back and they'll debate vigorously. I mean, we handled it in the appropriate way where it can't get personal. We teach them how to debate the right way. And despite this, them learning how to be very skillful in their applications of logic and the various hierarchies of persuasion, despite that, they don't remember anything, it seems. It's wild, actually. So it helped me appreciate how dim the consciousness is. Despite how they appear, those 7th, 8th graders appear to be so awake. They're right there on you. Oh, don't trust that. Don't give in to it. They're dim. Sorry. No offense to any of you. But you were all 7th and 8th graders once. You were dim. I was too. We were. But learning, no matter how dim, is still happening. Just like it was happening for that baby learning to walk. The learning, however, instead of coming through imitation and just a pure will, those things are still working. They're still in there, but they're not at the forefront. At the forefront now needs to be rhythmic experiences. So, here's an example. In 1st grade, actually, let me say a little more about rhythmic experiences. They need to have these experiences. They'll have these dim little ahas, and then we let it go to sleep. As it will. They're going to go home. They're going to go home for the day. And they're going to forget what we were doing in class. They're not going to think about that. Of course not. And I don't want them to, actually. And this is something Steiner said. We want them to let these lessons go to sleep. Because something very powerful happens when these things go to sleep in us, and then we reawaken them the next day, and the next day, and the next day. When that rhythm, am I moving around too much? I'm so sorry. Got a camera back there now. Okay. When we reawaken these things, it's as if we have taken, please don't be offended by this analogy, but it's as if we've taken what we ate. I'll go there. I won't offend you with talk of manure. We ate things the first day, and it's like there are scraps, and we throw them in the compost pile. And the next day, we can use that compost to grow something new, and then we can eat those fruits. This is a very quick metamorphosis and growth period, right? And then and so it's as if each day can become more and more powerfully composted. What could have just simply gone to waste if we had let it go to sleep and thought, oh, I taught them the letter M. They've got it. Now we'll move on. I've taught them 2 plus 2. We'll just move on. They've got it. If we don't systematically and rhythmically reawaken these experiences, because saying teaching them 2 plus 2 is very different than letting them experience 2 plus 2, or let me even say in a better way, letting them experience the quality of 2. So if we were to jump on our 2 feet, 2, 4, 6, now I'm having an experience of 2s right here in my body. I hope there's not mud on my boots. 2, 4, now I'm having a real experience of 2s. Or 2, 4, 6, and feel the difference? Can you feel that now? I'm the one clapping, but you can probably feel it. Let's clap. Let's do it. Here we go. I'm not going to make a jump. Ready? We're going to count 2, 4 on the second clap. 2, 4, 6. That's good. That's good. You feel the difference? I mean, they're just counting by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8. Sure, you can do it. That's very mental. Very mental. But as soon as we put some experience to it, we're having a very different experience. And if you want to keep this rhythm in a steady beat, you have to have something else happening. Right. You feel it? You feel it immediately when I fall out of rhythm. Right? When we're in rhythm, there's something else taking over in the experience. 2, 4, 6, 8. It's so harmonious. It's so beautiful. It's an experience of beauty. That's in the world. Music is the math in the world. So we want to bring these experiences to them rhythmically every day. And when I say rhythm, I mean in the big picture of rhythmically, that we experience it, go to sleep, we wake it up. We experience it, go to sleep, wake it up. Not just the simple, matter of clapping and stomping and skipping, but an overall life rhythm. That's why those of you who've had any of the teachers, early childhood or grade teachers, will say it's so beneficial for your child to have regular daily rhythms. It's so beneficial to have a mealtime. It's so beneficial to have a time when I'm not going to dictate to you what you should do in your home, but whatever you do, I'm going to assume that you eat and you go to sleep. So I'm just going to say those 2 things. I'm going to say one more. You really ought to start your children doing chores as soon as possible. You don't have to make them work hard. There should be a time to do something that contributes to the house, even if they're terrible at sweeping or whatever it might be. Have them do something. They'll actually love it. If you start early enough, if you wait till they're 12, I promise it's not going to work out. Have a nightmare. I promise. So, that experience of, this is when we eat. This is when I wipe the table. I should say wipe the table, so I wipe the table every day. My mom and dad pick up the plates, but I wipe the table. And this is when I brush my teeth. This is when I put on my pajamas. This is when we read together. This is when I go to sleep. That rhythm will take over. Do any of you struggle with bedtime? Is there any struggle with bedtime? Thank you for being brave. Thank you. Anybody else? Come on. Yeah. The struggle with bedtime can have two things in it. One is that you just lack the rhythm, so your child hasn't surrendered to the rhythm, because rhythm will overwhelm them eventually. But there's also those children who are so willful, because I mean, these forces, yeah, I know. These forces are not equally distributed among all children. Some children are incredibly willful, incredibly so. And for whatever reason, they chose you, which means you could handle it, or at least you can handle it with some help, and that's why you chose Waldorf School. And we're all in this together. We really are. We're all in this together. In the classroom, we want to bring that same rhythm. This is when we do this. That's why if you get to a point, if you're not already, where you have a child in the grades, your teacher will go through a very typical rhythm each day. It's not that it's identical each day, but there are going to be aspects that repeat over and over. And when they start first grade, well, I'll just say this. My experience has been, at this school, I had wonderful colleagues in the early childhood who passed along to me classes who were already rhythmicized, if you will. I didn't have to struggle too mightily. Like they got it. Here we go. You know, there was some adjustment, but they got it. They were used to rhythms. If you were starting a first grade that didn't have that rhythm, or just a collection of children, let's have a first grade, let's do this. And you just say, okay, now we're going to do circle, and we're going to do all this stuff that we do in Waldorf School. It would be a little harder. You would have to maintain through your own will forces as a teacher and your own rhythmic etheric forces, you'd have to maintain a certain rhythm for them for weeks to see them finally start surrendering to it. And Veronica's watching me do it just over the course of this week in third grade. I'm teaching in third grade right now. And I am working as I haven't worked in a while. And I'll say a little bit more about this, but I'm going to plant the seed. As long as I do this, as long as my will and my feelings are in check, they stand no chance of rebellion. And I mean it that way, they will joyfully surrender. If I layer something on top of it with a charge, well, I've just made the matter completely untenable. This is the key. This is where we all get in trouble. Right here. Right here. Parents, teachers, everybody. Right here. This is the trick. I'll get to that in just a second. Hi, welcome. So, now, I'm going to an example. First grade. We want to introduce them. Now, they've lived, so let me kind of give you a principle before I go into this. There's a principle of whole to parts. The wholeness is that we haven't brought them any abstract lessons yet. They've been through the Waldorf kindergarten, they've had experiences, they've had rhythm, they've had worthy models to imitate, they've experienced a wonderful program that's just given them time to play and move and have healthy interactions with others, although, how that can go with the little ones. But, healthy, relatively speaking. And then they come into the grades, and now we're going to bring them actual lessons, and we're going to teach them, for instance, about our language. Up until this point, they've had a very big holistic experience of language, where they've been hearing wonderful stories from their parents and their early childhood teachers. I say parents because I hope you're reading with your children. I hope you're reading with your children. And when we speak to them or play with them or do little finger games or we tell them little nursery rhymes, we are giving them fine and sometimes fun examples of the mother tongue, of the living language. We don't dissect it. We don't talk about nouns and pronouns. We don't tell them, no, that was an adjective. None of that before first grade. In the Waldorf movement. But when they come to first grade, we begin to move toward those parts. So now, I tell them a story one day. And in this story, it's a fairy tale in first grade, and in this story, there are some mountains. I'm going to give the classic example. There are some mountains in this story. They hear the story, goes to sleep. I don't work with it again that day. They go home, they come back the next day. We go through, we do our circle movements. We might review the story a little bit. We now are ready to look back. We've woken the story up with our review, and now we're ready to look back at, okay, that story. In that story, there were some mountains. What a great word that is. Let's all say mountain together. Ready? Mountain. Let's do it again. Mountain. One more time. Mountain. Did you see how I just did that rhythmically with you? We just said mountain 3 times in rhythm. That's good stuff. And not only that, we were tuning in to our own speech and our own listening. And now I'm going to ask you, when you hear that word mountain, can you hear the first sound in the word? Mountain. You can hear it, right? I'm not going to take you through every part of that process, but they do. They're super excited. It's I just raised my hand like a first grader would raise their hand. They do eventually. And then we can say, anything. We can do anything with that. We can play with that. So, what other words are there? We can play with that. Now, because we have just taken a small part out of the living language. Notice I haven't written a thing. I haven't written a thing yet. I haven't even talked about a letter, right? I haven't even talked about anything except there is a whole word, mountain. We know it's talking about something. It's a word. And it's got a sound at the beginning. So we're still only taking a part of the living language. And then when we say, you have other words, the word starts with moon. Mary, my name's Mabel. All those things happen, which is fun. They're playing with the living language. We're also seeing that their auditory processing is in good shape so far. And now, we've played with it enough, you can say, okay, that letter that says, it has a name. We call it M. Now we've just come down another level into, we're almost getting into abstraction now. We're naming sounds. How strange. But you have to. And we can write the word mountain, and now we can write the letter M that mountain was part of. Oh, I'm sorry, I let that stay instead. I'm so sorry, I get caught up in this process. The second day is drawing the mountain. Then the third day, we're actually going to pull the letter out of that shape, that classic mountain shape. There it is. Oh, you see it? There it is in our picture. That is the symbol we use to say that sound. That's named what? M. And now we have a letter. Now that's the best we can do to not destroy their experience of language. Right? Because if I just said, all right, kids, you hear that sound? Let me kill it even more. Hey, kids, look at this. That's a letter. It's called M, and it says Remember that. Hey, here's another letter. Right? Here we go. Cold, dead. Wait, what? What? Symbology? Kids, these are symbols. Let's go. Let's go. This is crazy stuff. So I love that Steiner understood these principles of going from whole parts, and that in the grades, if we can bring them that rhythmic experience, going from the whole experience of the language, through the picture, through the experience of the sounds, all the way slowly down to, if we just rhythmically take them down to that letter, there's a chance that the language still retains some magic for them. There's a chance. If we can keep it lively, if we can keep singing songs, if we can keep saying little verses, if we can keep repeating nursery rhymes, if we can keep playing, then we can retain some magic. Yeah. Time check. What time is it?
7:14.
What am I stopping?
8:30.
8:30. Oh gosh, don't tell me that. I'll go on and on.
No pressure.
Let's just say 8 for now. I tend to do that. Okay. That's first grade. Let's look at third grade. Okay, for third grade, we're fully into this time of rhythmic, etheric type of development. And we are engaging not just the willing forces, but the feeling forces. Just like I said, there's a feeling force experience going on there. So in third grade, where I am actually this week, there's still a rhythmic experience, and there's a whole new sort of ever so faint consciousness being birthed by the third grader, typically the third grader. Somewhere around the 9th year, they go through what is termed the 9-year change. I want to put 3 stages to it. I think that there's a 9-year crisis. I think there's a 9-year transformation, and I think there's a 9-year resolution. And I say 9-year, again, loosely, sometime in this period of life. The crisis is epitomized, I think, by questions such as, if your child ever comes to you with a question such as, Mommy, was I adopted? Daddy, are you my real dad? Was I actually born? You just, I've heard lots of questions. Parents have reported lots of questions as we have parent meetings all these years. What is happening, though, in this questioning is a sense that things are not quite what they used to be. There's a perfection of experience that's just subtly beginning to crack. The whole world, all of life, was perfect. It just was, even if it wasn't. Look, okay, I'm not going to pretend or try to sell you at all that every child's life is perfect, okay? That's not what I mean. I mean they accept it as perfect, right? Even if they're starving. I mean, they'll feel hungry, but they don't, get into an argument with mom about, where's the food? Right? It's not like that. Their experience of consciousness isn't like that. But that does begin to shift sometime around this age. They begin to also experience that they have a world in themselves. Again, very, very faint. Everything I'm saying here is so dim, but it's there. There's a world in themselves that's very faint, that no one else has access to. I remember this. I remember being able to look my parents in the eyes and say something that was not true for the first time right around there. I was probably much older because I was a really golden child, but I'm just kidding. I learned that I could lie. I didn't think it was lying. I didn't have that consciousness, right? But I did learn that, there's new ways of being in the world. And I started to see, little things that weren't perfect about mommy and daddy and teacher and friends and whatever. Even my toys weren't perfect anymore. Now I needed to have that remote control thing. That would complete my life. This can be a crisis to a greater or lesser extent for different children, again, depending on who they are, what they come in with, how they're organized, what their life experiences are, what we feed them with our consciousness. If we teach them to worry, by worrying, guess what they learn? They learn to worry. If we give them attention when they act hurt, guess what they'll do more? They'll act hurt. I can go so many places with that. Okay. I just saw it today. We saw it today. Kid just threw out the big old, I can't do this, my back's hurting. My back is hurting. In 3rd grade. And all I was asking, this is what I was asking him to do. Put your right hand on top of your beanbag. I swear, I'm not exaggerating. So there was a major moment of transformation this morning. God, I'm sorry, I just went down a whole rabbit hole with that kid. So we have different experiences, all of us, at this stage, depending on how we're organized. And so it can be quite a dramatic experience of the 9-year crisis, or it can be subtle. Either way, we all have it. We all dawn on this idea that there's something that can happen inside me that my parents don't know about. And I'm starting to see my parents aren't perfect. And all those things are dimly dawning on us. And it can be, for some, in fact, I'm going to say for most, to some extent, it can be a crisis that we need to address. And so the way that the Waldorf curriculum addresses that is by bringing in a very practical curriculum. We're still learning academics in 3rd grade. We're still working on the reading, writing, arithmetic stuff. Absolutely. And we're bringing in gardening. We're bringing in, perhaps, you don't have to do all these things. Let me make that clear too. It's better to do 1 or 2 of these things really well than to try and do it all and do it all poorly. Okay, let me make that really clear. So if you get to 3rd grade and your teacher doesn't choose to have whatever, animals, don't feel like you just got shortchanged. There's no need to try and do everything. The whole point is that a couple of these can build the new confidence that we're trying to build. So when they learn, for example, how to sew, oh, I could patch my jeans myself? Awesome. That's pretty cool. When they learn how to crochet, oh, I can make a pot holder for my mom or dad. Sorry, don't mean to be anything. Anybody can cook, anybody can pot holder. Okay, doesn't matter. Or a person. I can make a pot holder for another person. That's awesome. It's awesome. I can make things. I can do things. I can care for animals. I can even learn a little bit about how structures, houses, shelters are built. I can do these practical things. And I know a lot of people can get triggered by what are the story themes of 3rd grade. I call them the Hebrew mythology stories. You could also call them the Old Testament, because that's exactly where they come from. Now, if you have the little trigger with Christianity, that might bring up something for you, but I'm going to try and help you with that. The reason that these stories are so great is that if you'll listen to what I just described to you about the 9-year change, you'll realize, if you know the Old Testament, you'll realize that's exactly what the Old Testament is about. Adam and Eve live in a perfect place. I don't care what religion we're talking about. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's a story about 2 people living in a perfect place. And then they get tempted to do something they shouldn't, and they do it, and then they have to suffer. And what did they do? What did they do? Did they do anything really bad? I mean, according to popular stories online, you read, they ate an apple. They ate a fruit, right? But it's an apple. Listen, they ate an apple. What's so bad about that? Why doesn't God want them to eat an apple? Don't freak out, okay? I'm not teaching your kids Christianity. This is not the point at all. At all. The reason is because that fruit came from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Guess what we just described? They start sensing that there's a world inside myself where I can do things that mommy and daddy, God, you're God, to them. Mommy and daddy don't know about. And apparently, even though somehow God is all-knowing and omniscient and all-powerful and all those things, God had to come walking through the garden and say, hey, Adam and Eve, where are you guys? Where are you? What have you been doing? That story somehow didn't make sense to me later when I started thinking about it. But anyway, it's still a good story. Because they had eaten, they got tempted, and they ate. And what were they tempted by? A serpent. Lower nature. Inevitable. It's inevitable. It was inevitable. It's going to happen when your kids grow up. They're going to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Every single one of them is going to do it. We did it. Did you know you did it? You did too. We all did. And then we learned. And then life wasn't so perfect. Oh, now I might feel some shame. I'm naked. Maybe my parents actually see me after all. Maybe they do see I'm guilty. I ate that cookie. My first lie, I remember was telling my dad straight to his face, nope. I did not eat that cookie. I didn't. No. But I couldn't really manage it. I mean, he had to know, just looking at me like, what, are you kidding? Son, don't go down the path of lying. You're horrible. But, nakedness as a symbol of that realization that this wasn't great. this isn't working out quite the way I thought. That serpent said this was going to be awesome. It's not quite so awesome. And now God says, I got to leave the garden. Adam and Eve, get out and stay out. And now you'll give birth under toil. Why, that's hard on the women. What about the men? What do? Well, you got to work in the fields and do all that stuff. Well, that's very sexist. Okay, now we're reading it the wrong way. Let's look at it as a whole human being. Thank you for laughing. I think it's all funny. Let's just look at everybody. We all give birth. And it's not easy to give birth to something in this world. When you want to create something, it's not easy. We don't live in paradise anymore. We can maybe work back toward making it a paradise for one another, but let's not pretend we all live in paradise. It's hard in this world. And that's what they're beginning to experience. And that's why these stories are perfect. And if you read the Old Testament, you'll see that every single story that follows is exactly the same story, pretty much. God says, hey, don't do that. They do it. Oh, suffrage. Hey, don't do that. They do it. Don't build an idol. Whoops. We built another one. I mean, if you just take it as a series of stories, it's like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It's the same absurdity. The story I told today, I'm sorry I get off on these tangents, but the story I told today was about Pharaoh, when Moses is saying to Pharaoh, let my people go. And do you remember? I don't know if you heard these. There are 7 plagues. 7. Okay? And they're not like little things. You know, it's like the river turns to blood for 7 days. Millions of frogs come out. They just get everywhere. All over the Egyptians, not the Hebrews, all over the Egyptians. And swarms of biting flies. Locusts that eat the fields. Storms of hailstones that kill people who are out in the open, that kill all the livestock. I mean, it's just like plagues, right? Plagues in the real sense. 7 of them. Okay, but after each one, Moses goes before Pharaoh and says, I'm sorry, no. Pharaoh calls Moses and says, hey, this is crazy. Stop it and I'll let you guys go. And every time Moses waves the staff and the plague stops, then Pharaoh goes, nah, get back to work. Like, yeah. It's the same story again every time. Every time you think you're learning your lesson. No, here we go again. Suffer. Oh, not going to do the right thing. Suffer. Oh, not going to do the right thing. Suffer. How long do we have to suffer? Do you ever look around at your own society of human beings and think the same thing? I do, a lot. I don't mean to be negative, but I look at the news and think, what? We're still competing over stuff? We haven't gotten sharing. They're teaching us that in kindergarten. Okay. Yeah. Gosh, where was it? 3rd grade. Okay. So, in learning these practical skills, as well as having these stories overlaid for their souls, their little sleepy, dimly awakening souls, we're just giving them this wonderful balm for their experience of life. Their ever so tender budding into the harsh reality of living on the earth. That's what these stories soothe. In a sense of sort of commiseration with the Hebrew people. I mean, why did the slaves, why did the African, I shouldn't call them American, why did those stolen African slaves find? I grew up in the South, so I'm speaking out of something I've actually seen. There's a very strong sense of like commiseration between those sort of gospel churches and Israel. Why? Why were so many of those slave spirituals being sung and the words were read, oh, Israel, and Moses lead us to the promised land? Why? Because they sensed it. They sensed that kinship, of suffering, of hardship, of actual slavery. I mean, Israelites were slaves in Egypt. I'm not going to suggest that we are all slaves in the same way, but I can suggest that we can all commiserate a little bit. We all get that life is hard sometimes, and there's imperfection in the world. 6th grade. 6th grade's right on this cusp here. We get to 6th, 7th, 2 is going to be true. We have a whole new thing happening now.
We had the change of teeth, like the most physical part of our bodies just burst out of our mouths, right? Knocked out those little milk teeth and come in with these big old things that are hard. The last things to burn, right, if you're cremated. These are the most physical aspects of our body to show physical flower, physical development, boom, flower. Right? What is the flower for the human being that shows this life force coming to its full fruition? Puberty. Now we can create life with our own bodies. We can procreate. So we grow hair, we grow body parts, things start getting more active in different ways than they used to be. Puberty. Maybe we even have new interests in the other sex, or same sex, or whatever. Sex, we use the word, I said it. Sex becomes a thing in this age range. Okay, it's different for different kids, for sure. It will also be affected by how much they're exposed to media. I can assure you, let me just say it right now. Really deeply consider not giving your child a phone until they're out of elementary school. It's a downward slippery slope. Very hard to get out of it once you're in. Very hard. Don't know that I've seen a single child get a phone that didn't see porn. Not a single one. And even those parents who are techie and had all those protections on, well, guess what those children did? They looked at somebody else's phones. Real easy. Real easy. Just suggesting. I've said this 100 times. Like, band together. Don't let the phones into your lives. Tell them. Okay. That's not my talk tonight, though, so I won't go into that one. I will say, though, in 6th grade, they are waking up to it naturally, the sex thing, but that's a natural part of their bodies and their bodily forces coming to that fruition that shows a whole new aspect of engaging in the world is coming to bear. These astral forces. So now, feeling is definitely a big deal. All through here, feeling is a very big deal. And now we're going to put on to feeling the urges, impulses, and desires that these kids have. And I don't just mean sexual, I just mean urges. Like, I've got the urge to talk right now, and I'm tired of raising my hand anymore. I'm just going to talk. Even though we've been raising our hands for 6 years, now you're acting like you don't remember. Are you okay? Because they have to. They're going toward their individuality. Really starting to get there now. And they have to. They're going to have to rebel. They're going to have to call you names and say they hate you. Probably more than once. And if they don't, you might think about whether or not you've overpowered them. I'm serious. They need to be able to say stuff like that, and you need to be big enough not to take it personally. And if you're just locking them down, that's going to backfire. Because they need to do these things. They're working toward individuality. And so in 6th grade, we're helping them handle that by engaging them in some very interesting activities. In 6th grade, the story themes are ancient Rome, power, might, law, and order. But mostly power, might. When you really hear about Roman history, it's nice. We have that wonderful, beautiful time where, there's a Senate and we get all these nice democratic things like this. But it's power. And the only reason we're maintaining order is because we're more powerful when all our soldiers are in order, and all our builders are in order, and our city's in order. We're more powerful. It's more about power. There is wonderfully this aspect of order. And it's nice, but it's more of a seed than the overarching theme, in my opinion. Then Rome falls because of its own power hungriness. Its emperors go mad, and they just rot from the inside out, and the Visigoths show up, and basically they just expose the weakness. The Visigoths are nothing but a virus, historically, okay? They're a virus. Viruses don't make you sick. It's true. Viruses don't make you sick. They expose your already existing level of dis-ease or unhealth. They just expose it. We all get exposed to viruses all the time. All the time. Why don't I get sick all the time? Because sometimes I'm really healthy and I can fight it off. And other times I'm not. So the virus really just exposed. Same thing. The Visigoths just exposed what was already corrupted completely from the inside out in Rome. And we have the Dark Ages in Europe. This is something the sixth grader can relate to. Because they're starting to feel their bodies get heavy. They've changed. They've changed. So there's the, for all the, like, you may think, I don't know, remember your own puberty for a moment. Remember it. Do you remember feeling awkward? Do you remember feeling a little embarrassed? Do you remember feeling kind of excited too? But it was weird. It was new. And it's like, what's going to happen next? And I don't know. What am I supposed to wear? What am I supposed to do now? All those things are a little awkward, or can be. And so this dark age is also where it's like, yeah, and now my childhood's gone. Like, I get it. I'm never going back. I don't know. I can't play with I used to love that stuffed animal. And now I'm not going to play with stuffed animals. I remember Landon, sorry, I shouldn't name that kid.
No, it's true.
I remember a son saying that he could no longer feel it when he went outside to play with his sword and his cape. I remember that so vividly, it just struck me. It's like, oh, that's it. That's it. So we bring them stories from the Dark Ages. And in the Dark Ages, this darkness, there are these stories of these wonderful little centers of light, these little convents and monasteries. It's not about Christianity, it's really not. It really isn't. It's just about history. They were preserving the learning in those dark times. They were like the last vestiges of any order, of human kindness. And then, of course, this whole influx from the Muslim world, the Arabs and the Moors that brought in so much learning and wonderful things. Again, it's not about Islam. Islam's a vehicle, sure, but it's not about teaching them Islam. It's about just understanding human development that they can relate to. Okay. In all of this, in all of their despair of having lost their childhood, and all of their excitement with what's budding within them, we try to help them. And I'm going to show you an example. This is water. Yeah. The way we help the teacher, there might be something else in here. I'm just kidding. Everybody see this? Let me hold them up. So we got two bottles, same size bottles. That's very important for you to see that. Same size bottles. And you can see two different levels of water. It's almost the same tone. There it is. There's the experiment. That's how we help sixth graders, right there. So, I'm going to take you through the process. What did I just do? Just simple, just simple. One thing we do is we say, okay, what materials do we have? We got two same-size bottles, different levels of water. Let's just get past that one. What did I do?
You created a sound experiment, basically seeing what tone would come out of each bottle with the different levels of water.
Okay, wait. Two different bottles. Keep it real simple. Like if you were to tell somebody how to recreate this, what would you tell them to do? What did I do?
You struck the ball.
So I struck this bottle a few, and you don't have to count, like just a few times, right? And then I did what?
Struck the other.
And then I struck the other bottle. Good. Okay. That's first steps. That's what you do. It's a given, I should say, that we observe the effects. That's just a given. We don't have to say that. Sometimes we do write it, observe, but hopefully that's obvious. Then what did I do? Somebody else say it. I blew across the opening of both bottles. That's hard enough with sixth graders, just to take them through a clean procedure. Just like, what did I do? Because they'll start coming up with all sorts of stuff. Their thinking forces are just being born. And they're just like little babies that like to kick and, kick. That's what they want to do with their thinking forces. And they're just as skillful as that little baby with their thinking forces. Which is not fair. They really think they are. But, we all know. Okay. So, now, I'm going to ask you to try and objectively tell us what you observed. And by observation, I want you to confine your statements to any of these, or more, one or more. Touch, taste, sight, sound, smell. Just any of those senses you used to have any observations at all. Did you have any observations? Boys, sixth graders will just jump all over this. We as adults know, well, I'm being set up here. I know there's a trick. If I speak right now, he's going to show how this is crazy. No, I need somebody to just say something.
Pitch. You hear different pitches.
Thank you. What?
Pitch.
Pitch. Okay, and by pitch you mean?
You hear pitches.
Yeah, so we hear, and so when you say different, can you just say what was different about them?
One was more, I guess, would be bass,
Okay.
lower, one was higher.
Perfect. That's actually quite objective. We heard a lower pitch and a higher pitch. And let's just keep it to just when I was knocking for now, okay? So when I was knocking on the balls, we heard a lower pitch and a higher pitch. Which was which?
More airspace was lower.
Depends on what
Maybe.
action you're doing.
Okay.
I guess
The one with more air in it, we can say that. The bottle with more air in it had a lower pitch.
I believe so.
Let's see.
Oh, I guess not. Ooh, see, I was set up.
No. No, we're going to find out why that was confusing in just a second. And it doesn't matter, right? Because we're all in this together. And this is another great thing for sixth graders. To take that, they're awkward, right? They're awkward. Some of them are really awkward. And I don't mean it like they actually are. I mean they really feel like they are. They really feel so tender. And they're scared to speak out and say something like that. Like, which one was higher? And suddenly, deer in the headlights. And if we can just start to help them understand, it's okay to take a shot at it. It's okay. We're doing some real good there. We want our children to keep growing and attempting things. We want them to try stuff. Not try everything. We also want them to learn how to have good judgment about what they shouldn't try, but we do want them to try a lot of things. So, what about when I blew on the holes? Where were the... What was the... okay, what?
It was the opposite.
It was the opposite. I was going with that answer. Okay, that's good. That's good. Let's see it. Oh, let's hear it. It's the opposite. Okay, now we've observed. And those are actually very objective observations. I can promise you you're better than sixth graders. So congratulate yourselves. You've made it out of sixth grade. Why? Why is it true? And this is doing two things. Number one, we're assuming that what you've observed is true. We're not even going to get into anything else. Just take for a second the assumption that your observations are true. Because we should all be able to observe that, and I did too. Once you've said it, I can corroborate. Yes, I observed that too. So we now know we're accurate, at least with each other. So let's just assume it's true. And then let's also just allow ourselves the freedom to create laws about science, even though I might go home and tell my parent that this is what I discovered today. And parents are like, oh, no. Well, you see in the study of acoustics, son, and now we're getting into theories, and I might happen. We have to train parents not to do that for a while. But for now, in the classroom, we can all just go into it. Like, what's happening here? What's this law? What is this law? Why did that happen? Somebody say it. Take a wild stab at being a scientist.
The density of mass.
Thank you. I have no idea what that means. And it doesn't even matter, right? Doesn't even matter. Doesn't matter. No offense, but it doesn't matter. So somebody's going to say stuff, and they're all going to start saying stuff. Oh, well, the air was vibrating. And they get to say it when we're in the conclusion part, where we're starting to make up laws. Because guess what? That's what scientists do. They take their best possible guess at why things have happened that they can observe as objectively as possible, and then what do? After they've taken their best possible guess, they test it further. And that's what we teach them to do. So we're bringing them along the path by allowing them to trust their own senses. Don't just go read theories out of a science book. Is anybody else hot?
I am.
I'm sweating, actually, too. Let's crack the door. There's a sense. I just had a sense of warmth and wetness, actually. It's a sense of touch. I get sweat and starting to roll down my spine. So now, we're helping them trust their senses. Don't just go read theories. Don't just read whatever. The earth travels around the sun. Okay, that's somewhat true. But guess what? I see every single day of my entire life. I've never, ever seen the earth move. Ever. Not once. I watch the sun go across that sky every single day. But you ask any child, which one's moving, the earth or the moon? The earth or the sun? And they'll tell you, earth is going around the sun. Because they've all heard that theory many times. And I'm not saying it's not true. It is true. Of course, we learn. And in relativity, they're both actually affecting each other. The sun is actually moving a little bit, but because of mass, it's not moving as much. True. When we really get objective about it. But we got to get them there. We got to take them through the same journey that scientists have taken themselves. And again, just like that third grader learning to have confidence in themselves and their abilities, the sixth grader is learning to trust their own senses, which we want them to do, because when they're at a party in high school and somebody says, take this, we want them to have a question in that moment. We want them to trust their own senses. We want them to have some part of themselves that's authentic still. And you may not think that these things are related. All I'm going to say is I've been doing this for a long time. I'm telling you, they're related. We're building their forces. We're not just teaching them about science. We're building the human being through teaching them about science. And I'm not even building. That's the wrong word. We're not building. We're supporting their growth, which is building itself. If we can just train their growth in the right way, they're building themselves. Education is drawing out of, not putting in. So I'm sorry I said building. That is actually the wrong picture to say. I am not building anyone else. But I am supporting their growth. And supporting them being strong in their growth. And that's another way to do it. At some point, they're going to leave us from Live Oak. They leave us right around here. They're going to go off to high school. These forces are still at play. They've got all of these things working in them. Their willing forces, their feeling forces, their thinking forces, and eventually, sometime in their 20s, they'll come into their sense of ego. Actually, for men, I think we can just say it's more like 25, honestly. I'm just looking at the data that the insurance companies use. Male insurance doesn't go down until 25 because the numbers are just saying we're idiots driving cars until we're 25. Then we start to settle down a little bit. And they know, the numbers just don't lie, the numbers are right there. women typically sooner, and that's typical for a lot of these phases. Girls are quite often ahead a little bit. When the ego forces come in, we really have the chance, and I'm going to say it that way, we really have the opportunity to dawn into our full consciousness. And then we're at choice to take hold of these forces and continue to develop them, or just sort of ride out life. Just ride it on out. Now, you may think, well, there's nothing complicated there. Will forces, I choose what I do. Feeling forces, I got it pretty much under control. Thinking, I control my thoughts. Okay, let's see. Steiner has these wonderful exercises for teachers to try and continue developing these forces. One of them is called the will exercise. And it's quite simple. All you need to do is choose an activity that has no purpose, okay? It can't be, I'm going to get out of my bed each morning. I mean, you're going to get out of your bed. So you got to choose something that you would not otherwise do, has no purpose. It's not going to serve a function. You're just going to do it. And here's an example. The first one a teacher shared with me was, they said, every day at 3 o'clock, I take my keys out of one pocket and I put it in the other. There's no reason to do it, but every day at 3 o'clock, I do that. Okay. I thought that sounded really weird. And I wondered if I was in the right place when I heard that. But I stuck with it. And if you try to do this, I challenge you. Don't use any reminders. There's no alarm on your phone. That's not allowed. Just in your own will forces, choose a meaningless activity to do at the same time every day and see how it goes. See how it goes. How's it going, Noelle? How's it going, Sarah? Challenging sometimes?
Yes.
Very, very challenging. Lynn, I'm speaking to my colleagues because I know that we've worked on them. It's incredibly challenging. It's unbelievably frustrating. I thought I was just, that's something. So those of you who are looking right and you're thinking, do it, please, try. And if you can do it, good. Then you can move on to the other exercises too. There are more. Feeling exercises, actually, I think should come after what I'm going to describe as the thinking exercise. There's a focusing exercise. Very similar to the will exercise, actually, in certain ways, where you take some object, it could be anything, a little thing, a little something, let's just say a thumbtack, or a coin, or a paperclip, or any little simple nothing, just a whatever. And you observe it a little bit till you feel like you got it. And then, okay, now you're just going to spend, 5 minutes is plenty. Just spend 5 minutes where your thoughts are not on anything but that one thing. And you can think anything you want about that one thing. How was it made? What is it used for? You can flip it over in your mind. You look around with it. You shine a light on it. You can turn it different colors. You can do anything you want with that thing. But you got to stay on that thing. You got to stay on the paperclip for 5 minutes and do it day after day after day, after day, after week, after a month, after a year. I met a man once who said he'd been meditating on a paperclip for 15 years. What? I couldn't do it for 5 minutes. So, I'm not just kidding, but it's hard. Now, Steiner says, you do those two things, you are strengthening yourself tremendously. Even in your failures, you're strengthening your forces tremendously. And it's these two forces, actually, by which we access our feeling forces. At least at this point in our human evolution. That's mine. That means one of my children is calling. I turned my ringer off. I gotta check it. Sorry. Hey, is everything okay? I'll call you back in about an hour. All right, love you. Bye. It's only people that can ring through. I love that function. Okay. What's this thing? Yeah. Okay, accessing your feeling forces. Right now in our human evolution, Despite the fact, this is a fact, this is a medical fact, your heart muscles, your cardiac muscles, are striated like your skeletal muscles. It is true. I read that on the internet today. I checked it just to see. Would Wiki even tell me that? They do, they tell you that. It's true. Steiner talked about that as well. What is the significance? These are not voluntary muscles, are they? Are they? I wonder. Right now they're not, okay? Unless you've got some serious abilities. Right now, I don't think you're controlling your heartbeat, and I'm not either, so let's not pretend we are. But isn't that an interesting mystery? Interesting mystery to me. Interesting. So, right now, we access our feeling forces with the heart being emblematic of that. That's why I spoke about the heart. It's just kind of a symbol. We access it through our will forces and through our thinking forces. What do I mean by that? Well, go on a run. Go on a jog. You're going to feel different. Sit in a hot tub. You're going to feel different. Think about your most embarrassing experience. You're going to feel different. You might even blush. I get myself so worked up sometimes I break a sweat. Like driving a car when I should not be thinking about that kind of stuff. And suddenly I'm like, whoa, chill out. My mind is actually pretty strong. I don't have it very much under control, I'm going to be honest with you. As you can see, you're hearing it. I'm all over the place. But we can. There's the potential through these exercises of getting these things more and more consciously under control. And not just under control, but more and more conscious. So we move consciously into health. We move consciously into our greatest good. And this is what we're actually supporting when we do these things in the grades with these children who have these forces in them too. We're not telling them to do these exercises. But when you work on this experiment and you go through that process of recounting it and trying to differentiate between what is objective, what's that objective observation, and what is subjective, my thoughts about why that's true, when you can differentiate between those two things, you've grown in your consciousness. You have become a more responsible thinker. You are less likely to go out into the world and just simply argue for argument's sake because you're all worked up. You've at least got a chance of realizing, I am not being objective right now. I am laying into somebody. But my points, they're not objective. I'm just worked up. What if we could all do that? It'd be a great thing for humanity. It'd certainly be a great thing for politics, I think. If we can support them through our school in these early years, we create in these stages particularly habits, rhythms, and abilities, these forces they're going to use the rest of their lives, no matter what job they're going into, no matter what relationship they might be in, what kind of marriage, what kind of family, what kind of parental situation, whatever. They're going to take those forces everywhere with them. In the same amount of time, we are also teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic. We're teaching them about history. We're teaching them about science, certainly. But if I needed to tell you that, that's why you're here, so I can tell you about those building blocks of the curriculum. Yeah, you can read about that stuff. I wanted to really share with you the deeper aspects behind why we do those things, and why we do them when we do them, and why we do them how we do them when we do them. It corresponds to those levels of development that the children are going